Welcome to the Connect Like Minds podcast. I'm the host, Sharice. I interview people making a difference in their communities and in their creative spaces. Today's special guest is the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, the largest bed building charity in the world. Welcome to the Connect Like Minds podcast, Luke Mickelson.
Reese, I'm going to call you Reese.
Yes, not many
We're
people
that
get to
tight.
do that.
Yeah. So everybody, you're jealous. Too bad.
Exactly. So we're going to jump right into it. Tell everyone where you're from.
Reese, I'm from Twin Falls, Idaho. Just a small little, small. I don't know, 50,000. That's pretty big for Idaho, but small for other areas. But yeah, I grew up in even a smaller town called Kimberly, which is just a suburb of it, only 4,000 people. So I'm a small farm town kid from Idaho.
Okay. I'm from a small town too called the Eastern Shore. And I'm from an area called Pocomoke City, which is not a city. It's definitely the country area. We have cornfields. Like, I don't get why they call it a city. I guess because of the population. There's about 8,000 people there. But
Okay, yeah.
yeah, it's definitely country.
Let's call it. That sounds good to me.
What was it like growing up in Idaho, especially where you're from? How many streetlights are there? Like,
One. It's funny. And I was back in the day when there was zero. It was just a stop
man.
sign, right? No, it's great. I mean, Idaho, you get all the seasons,
Mhm.
right? Unfortunately, a big season's winter, which as the older I get, the less I enjoy winter. But, um, you know, it's an outdoor living dream, right?
Mhm.
In fact, I tell everybody, Idaho's terrible. Don't come because I don't want anybody to know. No, there's hunting and fishing and outdoor activities and skiing. I mean, it's just every person's dream if you're an outdoorsman.
Mhm.
Idaho, and it's beautiful. I mean, the whole Pacific Northwest is just beautiful, and Idaho, especially in the summer, you just can't beat it. And
Yeah.
it's a great place to grow up. It's a great place to raise your kids, and being from a small town, as you could probably relate. There's pros and cons to that, right?
Right.
There's everybody, and they know you. That's the pro and the con.
For sure. For sure.
But what as long as we share my story here, you learn that there's a lot of things that because you grew up in that environment, you don't know any different, right?
Right.
And when I started venturing out into other cities and other people and where they came from, boy, I look back at my childhood going, I had it pretty good, and
Mhm.
that because of that small community I lived in, you develop in your character, you develop this support system, or this, and it's certainly this willingness to connect with people and want to support people because that's what you did when you're in a small town, right?
Right.
When you know everybody and the struggles they're going through, and they know your struggles, so they're helping you and you're helping them, and that's just what you grow up with. And so it's probably no surprise later on in life that this is what I ended up doing. And I do stem that or relate that to my upbringing in such a small town.
What's something that you learned growing up on the farm that you use today?
Lots of things. And I didn't grow up necessarily on a farm. My parents and grandparents
Mhm.
owned a dairy for many years,
Mhm.
and I think they sold the dairy when I was one or something like that. But I had a lot of friends that still farmed. Their parents own a farm, and so I'd go and help them in the summers and get employed by them. So I knew what farm life, at least work for farming, was, and that was probably the biggest thing I took away from farm living, if you will. Is learning two things: is like hard work, right?
Yeah.
If it's meant to be, it's up to me, right? And you had to learn how to navigate out of situations. I mean, you might be out stuck in a field and ain't no one coming to help you. You got to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a lost skill nowadays, right? The beauty of living in such a advanced technological world is there someone else has the answer, and sometimes it's easy to find. And but one thing you do miss out on is solving your own
Yeah.
problems,
Critical
right?
thinking
So now,
skills.
yeah. Well, it's like if there's something wrong with the sink, let me see if I'll go figure it out, right? Or if
Yeah.
my kid's e-bike is have a problem, half the time I break it, but I'm gonna dive into it and try to figure it
Yeah.
out, right? And I think that's just what comes from in a small town. It comes from working on the farm, and you're left to yourself. In fact, I was just telling a friend of mine, I'd go back to my grandparents' house a couple of times when I was growing up for the summer, and I'd go work. Well, I was 12 years old, Reese, driving a $300,000 tractor on the side of a mountain at 12 years old. Can you imagine? There ain't no way I would ever let any kid nowadays And I'm talking about my own kids
Yeah.
drive a $300,000 tractor on a, but that's what you did. That's just what you
Yeah.
did back in the day, right? And so I'm really grateful that I had those experiences growing up.
Yeah, I think, you think back to the 90s and 80s, everyone was outside. Your parents let you just go outside, and as long as you're back before your one street light comes on,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right.
that's what was going on. Nowadays, that's probably unheard of. I barely
Well,
see kids in my neighborhood ride bikes. I unless they're visiting someone,
yeah.
haven't seen it.
It's a weird. This is funny, and I've never talked about this on a podcast, but being a parent nowadays is interesting because your kids, at least my kids, and we're a combined family, so I
Mhm.
got three and three,
Okay.
right? Six kids, and mostly boys, and it's just really interesting that if they're not in front of their phone, right, which is I think, a
Yeah.
big problem nowadays, they almost look to you, okay, Dad, what are we gonna do? Almost like it's my responsibility to entertain them, and you almost feel like a parent. I'm a bad parent if I don't.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting there thinking, I never asked my parents, hey, what can we go do? No, you're right. They opened up the back door, they kicked you out and said, come back in 5 hours,
Yeah.
right? You just had to figure it out on your own. And I think that's a little lost nowadays.
Well, you know what? I would like to add on to that. I think through the generations, like they change because
Mhm.
of emotional intelligence, and we're trying to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Toxic, less toxic than our parents were to us. And so you're trying to not give them too much, but not give them too little. And I think that's where that comes from, in my opinion.
I heard a I heard a really good talk one day, and you're right. There's pros and cons to all of it, right?
Yeah.
But I did hear a really good talk one day, and the leader talked about. He says, "Listen, don't don't make it so easy on your kids because what made you a good person is what your parents allowed you to go through, right?
Right.
So, and I think sometimes, and of course there's a balance there, obviously, but I do think we tend to life technology, where the culture of the world nowadays, it's far easier now in a lot of ways than what we had to deal with back then. And on the transverse side,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that you and I didn't, that kids nowadays deal with, that you and I didn't even, it wasn't even on our radar. I mean, just drugs and alcohol and the things that are going on in the world nowadays, they didn't exist
At all.
when we were growing up. And so there's easy things and there's a lot of harder things as well. And so yeah,
I
but
agree.
farm living is an older technology lifestyle living, and it's a pretty good one.
For sure. Now, while you were navigating life as a kid and even to in a young adult, did you have dreams of doing something different than what you're doing today?
No, I mean, I tell even people, I started this 14 years ago, 14 and a half years ago. If you would have told me I'm going to be building beds for kids for a living and for my legacy, I'd have laughed at you. No, I mean, I was like any other kid,
Yeah.
especially from a small town. If you knew how to pick up a ball of any shape and throw it in the right direction with any sort of accuracy, you're not only gonna play sports, you're told you have to play sports.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I grew up. I That's all I knew.
Mhm.
So there was 2 weeks of the year throughout my entire high school career where I didn't have practice or a game. Just 2 weeks. That's just what you did, right?
Mhm.
You played sports, especially if you were a good athlete.
Yeah.
You played sports and you played them all, and you played them every day. And
Yeah,
so, you just didn't have time for anything else.
for sure. I did a lot of sports growing up too. I was a runner, so I would cross country and I sucked at basketball, but I made a team because I could run.
Yeah, stamina, baby.
For sure. Once you got into high school, did you ever have plans of leaving Idaho and going away to college? Like, what were you planning to do at that time?
You know, from a small town, I think every small town person wants to leave their town, right?
Mhm.
You go experience the world, and later on you realize actually that's not a bad place to raise your kids, so you want to come back. It's kind of a weird dynamic, but yeah, especially being a sports player, right?
Mhm.
I had scholarships to some big colleges and dreams of being a professional athlete like every kid, and those dreams realization comes in, and maybe not professionally, but certainly at college. And then I'd be in sports medicine and train athletes, and those dreams shift,
Yeah.
as you get older. I didn't go and play college football because I went on a mission for my church, which was important to me at the time. And when you get back, you're older, and so you want to get on with your career. Always a push forward type guy, right?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't stop and smell the roses very often. I'm working on that, by the way. And I certainly don't dwell on anything in the past. I'm just a forward thinker. And so it's where that came in my personality, I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, I always wanted to get out. I always wanted to do something more. And really, that's one of the reasons why Sleep in Heavenly Peace, the charity I started, happened, is because, being 35 at the time in 2012,
Hmm.
I just I had a good job. I was coaching, and I was in church service and had kids, and on paper my life was awesome,
Yeah.
right? But just internally, I was at that stage in my life where I realized what I thought was success, what I thought was winning, what I thought was important in life started to change. I realized the zeros behind my paycheck didn't mean squat. The things I had, whether they boats or cars or the toys, they didn't mean squat. The direction and things I believed in, it I don't know what happens to you. You just start feeling differently about it, and maybe things that are more important to you start surfacing that were not important to you before, and that can bring up upon depression
Yeah.
and some anxiety, and and I'm a happy go getter type guy, and when you start feeling not that, and you start feeling down, and you'd start questioning yourself, and your confidence goes down, and you're sitting there struggling. You're like, no, I know I'm not like this. This is not me. But you can't pinpoint it. You can't
Hmm.
put your finger on it. And that's exactly where I was when all this started. And I felt guilty about it. I
Hmm.
felt guilty because I had a great life, and I had a good job, and I was making some pretty good money, and I had nothing to complain about. But inside, I sure was complaining to myself, and it bothered me for years.
Yeah.
Reese, it didn't matter how many pep talks I gave myself, right? You sit there on the couch, and this is not you, and you're doing fine, and blah 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 blah. And it helps for a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's the emotion, it's the feeling, it's the draw, that the gravity that pulls you back down into almost a reality that no, you're not okay. You can talk yourself out of it all you want, but you're not okay, and it's not a good place to be. And unfortunately, a lot of us get there.
For
You
sure. For sure. How did you end up pulling yourself out of that?
Well, it's a great question. At the time, I served as in my church
Hmm.
in a position called a young men's president. So, a lot of people would consider it like a youth pastor.
Okay.
Um, but ages 12 to 17, the young men's program, I was involved and responsible for their spiritual growth and what was being taught. But more importantly, the activities,
Hmm.
right? During the week, what would we do? And trust me, teenage boys' activities, trying to find something that didn't involve a screen or a game, is hard to do.
Yeah. You're in Idaho. You can find some, go on a trail or something. Go hiking.
Yep.
Get
Well,
them outside.
that's why that's why we adopted the Boy Scout program.
Okay.
Basically, is what we were. Yeah, and that really helped. Don't get me wrong, it really helped. But still, the ever growing attention and draw that these kids have nowadays on computers and
Yeah, it's
screens and stuff,
crazy.
it's a tough thing to compete with.
Yeah, it
And
is.
all these leaders listening to this podcast right now are shaking their heads, going, "Yep, I know it's a real struggle."
Yeah.
And so here I was, leading these Boy Scouts, and I was kind of like the leader of the Boy Scouts, right? I wasn't the Boy Scout leader, but I was managing, if you will, the different age groups and their leaders.
Hmm.
Well, a part of this position, we met on a weekly basis
Hmm.
with other leaders within the church, and we talk about events that were going on. We talk about people that the church was helping in and out of the congregation. Well, one family, particularly story came up. It first caught my ear because they lived in a part of town I didn't know existed. And trust me, I'd been riding my bike around that thing since I was little, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, wait a minute, where is this place? I didn't know that this thing's real. And then the second thing is, the leader that was telling us about this family, she had visited them, and she started talking about the things that the kids or that the family needed.
Mm-hmm.
And like almost in passing, Reese, she mentioned, well, these kids, they don't have any beds and they need coats and whatever. And I was like, wait a minute. Did you just say that they don't have any beds?
Mm-hmm.
Like they've got mattresses, right? They're sleeping on mattresses. She's no, they're just sleeping on the floor. And yeah, that was my reaction. I was in my head, I'm like, what? Like, keep in mind, small town,
Yeah.
we take care of each other. And at first I'm like, heck no, not in my town, right? And then I thought, here's a great opportunity. I was a handyman. Like again, farm kid, you figure it out, you
Yeah.
build stuff. And I wasn't a stranger to tools, although I've never built, at the time, I had never built furniture in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, tell you what, me and the scouts, we'll take care of that, And
Cool.
I got really excited about it because here was an opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these boys' hands and put a drill in it, right? And we're going to teach them something and solve a big problem for a family. And so I got really excited about it. I ran home and grabbed paper and pencil and tape measure and went downstairs to my daughter's bunk bed. She had a bunk bed
Mm-hmm.
and just started measuring it and figuring out how to do it. And voila, I come up with a formula and a process of how to build this bed. And so I invited the boys over that. And for the couple of nights, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that night, and we spent a couple hours and we built a bunk bed for this family.
Awesome.
And I would teach the kids how to use tools and then tell them what it was for. And they had a great time. We had a great time. It was super fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the word kind of got out within the congregation
Yeah.
that we were doing this, right? And it was exciting. Everybody like loved it, wanted to be a part of it. The bad thing is when it comes Saturday to time to deliver this bed, I had like 30 people show up at my house. And I'm like, guys, we can't send an army, over to this small 2-bedroom apartment. And so I stayed back with a couple of leaders to clean my garage up. It was winter time too. It
Mm-hmm.
was cold and needed a park inside. And so the boys and their parents and some leaders went and delivered this bunk bed. Well, the next day at church, I heard all the stories of how amazing it was, right?
Yeah.
And I was super happy for the kids because they got to see how excited these kids were. They'd never slept on a bed before, and now they got a bed that they built, right?
Yeah.
It was good to hear the stories, and I was happy for them, but I was also really jealous,
Because they got to
you know?
experience giving it to them. Oh,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it filled this hole,
Yeah.
Reese. It filled this hole that was in my heart of, it purpose and giving back and meaningful service and all these things that I just was trying to find a balance for instantly filled my bucket. And that was awesome. It was really awesome until life just creeps itself back in, right?
Mm.
And you fall back down in the rut of where the bed was built, the problem was solved, and now Luke's just fallen back down into this rut. And I didn't want to. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't like it. I knew it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't healthy for my kids. It wasn't healthy for me or my relationship with anybody, really. And something happened. I was sitting on this couch watching Big Bang Theory with my kids, right? Watching Sheldon, and some commercial come on. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something about a video game or Xbox. And being the fact that it was the first week of December, Christmas is just ramping up.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell what my kids were going to ask even before they asked it, right? And all you parents know exactly what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. And I remember thinking, don't you dare, don't you dare. And of course, Dad, can we get that Xbox? And I mean, they didn't know any better, but here I was, right? It was like a perfect storm. I'm sitting on the couch, just going through this internal turmoil
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about all the things that just happened last week and this great thing we did and trying to find balance with work and life and what does it mean and blah, blah, blah. And now my kids want this Xbox. They've already got one and they've got a bed. These kids don't have a bed. And now you're complaining you don't want, I mean, all of these things are just
Yeah.
rattling my head, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the next thing I knew, I stood up, didn't say a word, just started walking to the garage. And my kids were like, Dad, where are you going? The show's on. And I turned around and I said, listen, I've got extra wood. I'm going to build another bunk bed and you're going to help me.
Wow.
And so I pulled them out in the garage. And you know what, Reese? We had a great time.
That's
Me and my
awesome.
10-year-old and 6-year-old building the bunk bed. Had no idea what to do with it. Didn't know anybody that had kids sleeping on the floor. But by gosh, I wanted my kids to know the joy of service and
Mm-hmm.
giving back, as well as to appreciate the things they had.
Yeah.
And that was the main goal of building that second bunk bed.
Wow. And before we get too far into your nonprofit and everything that you have going on, I'm going to transition us into the next segment. And the next segment is called Digging Deeper. And during this segment, I'll ask you some thought provoking questions about your charity and your personal life and any other career plans that you may have going on.
Let's do it.
All right. So,
I'll share deep answers if you want them.
yeah, yeah, you've been doing great at that. So, when you built after you built the second bunk bed, was this the turning point in starting your organization, or did that come later?
It kind of came later, it was a culmination of it because keep in mind, I had no idea that child bedlessness was even a
Yeah.
thing, right? I only knew one kid in my community and we solved the problem, and there you go, right? This was more about having an experience with my kids,
Mhm.
teaching them a few lessons, it was a dad moment. It came later when I realized number one, I had my own experience of delivering a bed to a child, and I wanted this bed that we built to be very special. Like I wanted it because me and my kids built it.
Yeah.
It was awesome, right? And I didn't know what to do with it, so it was recommended to me to put it on like one of those buy sell trades on Facebook, one
Mhm.
of those groups. And so number one, I had to join one because I wasn't a Facebook guy, and so I put it on there, and I fully expected every Tom, Dick, and Harry, wanting a free bed, right?
Yeah.
And although we got a little bit of that, a couple of things surprised me from this post because the first thing was I started getting comments on this post from people I didn't even know existed. Like I didn't know that they even followed me. I didn't know how the algorithm worked, so it was really surprising me. This is 14 years ago. I didn't know if they had one back then, but um, but all of a sudden I was getting these comments from these people that I didn't know, people I knew but I hadn't talked to or seen for 20 years, right?
Wow.
That was surprising me. And they all knew of a child that didn't have a bed. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then I started reading and they were explaining to me the conditions that these kids were sleeping in. And that
Mm.
was what was shocking.
Yeah.
Hardwood floors, pallets, multiple kids to one bed, couches. I mean,
Mhm.
I just didn't know that this was the thing.
Mhm.
And then I get a call from a friend of mine who saw my post, and I'd served a mission with her, and she was like working in the social services sector, helping transitioning homelessness and things of that nature. And she says, have you found a child for that bed yet? And I said, no, I haven't. She says, I have the perfect situation. So little Haley was a 6-year-old girl
Mhm.
who'd never slept on a bed. She'd slept in the backseat of her mom's car. They were homeless, and my friend obviously helped them get a house for the first time. So it was a perfect situation, exactly what I was looking for. So I was really excited. We jumped in the car, a buddy of mine, we were in the truck, and headed out to this house.
Mhm.
Well, I think everybody to some degree has an idea of what homelessness looks like,
Yeah.
or at least transitioning homelessness and poverty and stuff. And I had too. I'd seen it before, but when I walked into the house, I'd never looked at it through the eyes of a 6-year-old, right? Because that's who we were there. You're always there for the family, but I was there to help this 6-year-old out. And
Mhm.
so when you walked in, it was shocking. There was nothing. There was no couch or table or TV for cartoons or
Mm.
anything. And when you start looking at that in the eyes of a 6-year-old and what 6-year-olds see and what 6-year-olds do and what they need, it became very shocking to me,
Yeah.
even more so than any other time before. I mean, the only thing that was in the house was a hot plate sitting on a milk crate that had a can of soup on it. That was it.
My goodness.
And so I looked down to little Haley, who, by the way, was super excited that she had a house and she was showing this house to. I
Oh.
mean, she didn't care that we were strangers, which was really funny to me. And I said, "Hey, show me where your room's at." And so she took us back into her room,
Yeah.
and Reese, you can imagine what it looked like,
Yeah.
right? Holes in the carpet and tears in the wallpaper. I mean, it just wasn't the greatest room in the world. But the most shocking thing to me was in the corner was a nest of clothes, just a pile of clothes that she slept on.
Oh.
And I quickly learned Haley would come home from school. She would put her PJs on, right,
Mhm.
sleep on her school clothes. That was her blankets and
Oh
pillows,
my
and then
goodness.
put her school clothes on and go to school. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Like, number one, this is happening under my own nose.
Yeah.
This is happening in my own community. Heck no. Like, yeah, that ain't going to happen.
Right.
And number two, sorry,
No, it's okay. It's heartbreaking.
when she realized what we brought her, when we started putting this bed together,
Mhm.
I'd never seen a child erupt with joy like she did, especially over something like a bed, for crying out loud,
Yeah.
right? She actually hugged and kissed the bed, Reese. I mean, it broke my heart. And if that wasn't enough, you'd sit on that couch and you'd look up at mom, and here's mom, single mom, 6 years of tears pouring down her face. And I was raised by a single mom. So Reese, I knew what every single one of those tears meant,
Yep.
right? And it just broke me. I mean, I remember thinking, here's this big tough athlete, farm kid, outdoorsman, football guy, tough guy, balling his head off,
Yeah.
right? At least inside. And I remember thinking, you know what? Wow, this is way more than a bed. This is way more than just a good night's sleep. And when we were done, my buddy and I were in the car driving home, and we didn't really say much to each other. I remember looking over to him when we finally got home, and
Mhm.
well, first of all, I remember thinking, for a couple of hours that night that me and my kids took to building a bed to solve that problem, okay, that's well worth my time. And in an instant, Reese, hunting, fishing, college football, all these things that kept my attention, they just didn't matter anymore. I mean, in a snap of a finger.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
It was a passion that I didn't know I had. And I looked over to my buddy and I said, you know what? No kid's going to sleep on the floor in my town if I have anything to do with it.
We
Ain't going to
we
happen.
need more people like you. We do in this world to fix
Well,
more
luckily,
things.
luckily, Reese, there are millions of amazing people out there. They don't even know they are, but
Mhm.
there are, and they can make a difference. They want to make a difference. They just don't know how. That's what probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned is there's so many amazing people out there. They just don't know how. And when you don't know how, you just kind of tread water.
Yeah.
And that's not comfortable either, right?
Oh.
No one likes that either. And I think maybe where I was at, right?
Mhm.
I just wanted to make a difference and I didn't know how, so I'm just treading water, and no one likes that,
Mhm.
right? And sleep in heavenly peace. When I got home
Mhm.
from that build, I was determined, or that delivery, I was determined I'm going to build as many beds as I can. Because remember, I had that post, right? And
Right,
I had all those
right,
comments,
right.
I had all those kids, and I had all these situations, blah, blah, blah. So we decided to build as many beds as we could. In that first holiday season, we built 21 beds and delivered them all before Santa showed up.
That's amazing.
It was fun. It was
How did
awesome.
why did you come up with the name Sleep in Heavenly Peace?
Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I am.
That wasn't the original name.
Oh, wow. So what was the first name, and then how did it transition to Sleep in Heavenly Peace?
Well, it's not actually a very long story.
Okay.
When we started doing this and we
Yeah.
started delivering the beds, I remember my wife at the time says, well, Luke, you got to call it something. I
Mhm.
got to call this little Christmas project something. And I said, don't worry. I got it. Beds for babes. Piece of cake.
That could be
Yep.
taken another way, you know?
Your face is exactly what my wife, she says, no, it's not. And it's probably not a very good Google search, by the way, so don't do that. My intentions were good, I
Yes,
promise you.
they are.
And she says, no, it's not that. And I said, well, okay, well, then what is it? What are we going to call it? And she says, it's Christmas time,
Mhm.
right? And I don't even know where she came up with it. She just blurted out, sleep in heavenly peace. And,
Okay.
Silent Night,
Yeah.
it's one of the greatest hymns, one of my most favorite Christmas songs. And honestly, it answered two things. It supplied two things. Number one, it said exactly what we want these kids to do, to sleep in
Mhm.
heavenly peace, right? And it also is a reminder, whatever religion you are, we all know the one child that song's talking
Mhm.
about who grew up without a bed,
Yep.
didn't have a bed, right? And so it really just connected and made a whole lot of sense,
Mhm.
and so it really stuck. In fact, kind of a funny story. I ran into Rob Schneider, Rob.
Wow, that's
I
awesome.
ran into him at a. It's funny. We were at this airport, and I look over, and
Yeah.
we're at the Sky Club or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
I don't even know why we were in there, but probably snuck in. I don't know. I look over, and I'm like, I think that's Rob Schneider because you only see him on
Right,
TV. Well,
right.
he had a hat on, and he's older, so he's a little grayer, but no one was sitting by him, and I'm like, if that's Rob Schneider, certainly someone's going to be sitting by him. But no, he was all by himself. And then a guy that I guess he was traveling with sat by him, and I heard him speak, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's him.
that's undeniable. That's him, right?
Yeah.
And the funny story is I didn't want to be that guy, right? I didn't want to go over there and hey, so I just kind of like, oh, that's cool. And me and my wife were kind of gawking about him. Well, because we sat so long and it took some time, we missed our flight. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh,
No.
we gotta get. So we were like running through the airport, got to the terminal, we missed the flight, great. So we had to wait another 3 hours. So I went back to the Sky Club
Hmm.
and he was still there. And
Wow.
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I don't care. I'm going to do it. So I went up to him. I said, Mr. Schneider, sorry, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm a huge fan. Do you mind if we get a picture with you? Dude, the coolest guy in the world. He says, absolutely. Get your wife over.
That's
Blah, blah, take a picture.
awesome.
And then he made one fatal mistake. He said, so what are you doing? And I'm like, I got you. So I popped out this pamphlet. I handed it to him. I
Yeah.
said, hey, I build beds for kids, a charity I started, blah, blah, blah. And to this day, he's been on deliveries with me.
Oh,
He's been to builds. He's a super cool guy. And I share this story because he texted me one time. He says, you know, Luke, I've been thinking about your sleep in heavenly peace. It sounds like a funeral home.
I didn't even think of that, but he has a point.
I didn't
He
either.
has a
Now
point.
when I think of Rob Schneider, I think of a funeral home. So
That's a
funny
cool
story,
story.
but yeah, sleep in heavenly peace. It's just exactly what we want these kids to do.
Okay. When you started Sleep in Heavenly Peace, did you wrestle with any doubts at that time? Or you were just like good with your faith
All in,
and
baby.
kept it moving?
You know, all in. And it never a doubt in my mind. This is what I am supposed to be doing. This was the right thing to do. This is what I wanted to do. It was a passion that I'd never found anywhere else. And still 14 years later, it burns just as strong as it did,
Mhm.
back in 2012. There was one period in time in my life that the passion didn't change,
Mhm.
but my career was in jeopardy because of it.
Mm.
And I had to choose between either stop doing my charity and focus more on my work, or I'd have to quit my job. And that was a stressful time.
Oh, yeah.
That was a hard decision, but it was also an easy decision in a way. Yeah, so I quit my full-time job, the job I had been in for almost 20 years, the business I was going to buy. My career was set.
Mhm.
I made good money. But again, when you stumble upon your passion and what really brings you joy, and when you really realize what matters in life, what is most important, you can't turn your back on it. You
Right.
just can't. And so that's where the decision became easy. And so I quit my job to do SHP full time,
Did your family
which
and
didn't
friends
pay a dime.
So, you're quitting this job that's basically, giving you a certain lifestyle.
Mhm.
Did your family, not your parents, but your family, friends, what did they tell you? Did they support this decision or your wife at the time? Like how
Well,
were people treating you when you did this?
so no one knew. There was only obviously, other than my wife and my very close friend Jordan that was helping me run the charity. They're the only ones that knew that there was this conflict going on with my work and the worry. And where this all kind of came to a head is I was using every ounce of my vacation time, every free spare minute I had, I was using for sleep in heavenly peace. And when you're running a business, especially a family owned business, it occupies more of your mind space than just 9 to 5.
Right.
Well, my boss knew that. He could see that, and he knew me very well, and I know he was thinking, listen, this is where Luke's passion is. So I don't think it was necessarily a malice decision or an ultimatum in a way. I think he was helping me to realize what I needed to realize, that I needed to do this,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm very grateful for him for doing that. It wasn't hard. It didn't feel like that at the time, but and it wouldn't have happened
Mm.
if I didn't have my wife at the time, Heidi, who supported me, right? I mean, not a lot of wives living in a very comfortable situation would go and sacrifice all of that for the unknown,
Right,
right?
right.
I was good. I didn't really care. I didn't care if I was going to live in a shack, right? But I was going to do this. And I was fairly confident I was going to find another job, but certainly not at this pay scale I was making back then.
Mhm.
So it was kind of a tough decision, but I was grateful that my wife allowed me to do it and my family supported me. And again, the reason why that came to a head is because my buddy at the time that was helping me run the charity, he called me up. He says, hey, listen, you need to take 2 days off in November. I can't tell you why. It's for SHP, but you need to take them off. And he knew what that meant because he knew the struggles and the kind of, I don't want to use the word threats, but what was going on at work.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, you realize if I go and say I need 2 days off at work, I'll probably lose my job. And he
Man.
says, I know. And this is how much faith I had in my buddy
Hmm.
and have in my buddy. He says, I know. That's why I'm still telling you, you probably need to take these 2 days off. So if that doesn't ring a bell of what does that mean? Like
Yeah.
something big's coming, but he wouldn't tell me. He couldn't. Well, later on, what I learned was Mike Rowe, Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs guy.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah, so he had an episode, or excuse me, a series called "Returning the Favor,"
Hmm.
which aired on a Facebook Watch back in 2012. If you're familiar with it, he'd go around the country and he'd highlight nonprofits, their
Hmm.
founders, and all this, and then he'd gift them something. Well, they had selected Sleep and Emily Peace, and he was coming to town. I didn't know, and so, all of a sudden, I took this day off, or these days. Actually, take that back. All of a sudden, I had to quit my job,
Yeah.
and great, now I quit my job, something big's happening, but no one would talk to me. I mean, I was on no talk to Luke shutdown. I mean, so
Wow.
it was a scary time. I just quit my job by charity, and now all of a sudden no one's talking to me. I was a little nervous,
And something was
but then of
waiting for
course,
you. And look, now where
yeah.
you look at where you're at now. So I know you're happy to
Well,
be taking that time off or quitting overall.
yeah. Well, when Mike Rose showed up and that episode finally 3 months later aired, it was viewed by 10 million people, and we went from the small little 6 or 7 chapters we had to where we're at today. Fast forward to 2026. We have 440 chapter presidents we've trained. We're in almost every single state. We're in 4 countries. And, halfway through the year this year, we will have built over 400,000 beds for kids.
Wow, that is amazing. It goes to my next question because I was going to ask, what was a turning point that helped you grow from one chapter to over 400? So
Yeah. There you go.
go ahead, you can answer
Well, and the
that.
cool thing is, well, I call those first generation chapter presidents because they saw the returning the favor, and even not so much obviously nowadays because it's 8 years later, but that happened. So we brought in 125 chapters the first year.
Hmm.
The second year was another 60 or 70, right? And then other things happened. I was on CNN as a CNN hero,
Hmm.
right? So that boosted and got us awareness.
Yeah.
I was on shows like Good Morning America and Hallmark and the Today Show. You can see kind of in my background, this smiles right there.
Yeah.
I was on the potato chip bag cover, right?
That's
So all these little
cool.
things, yeah, all these things little happened, right? And it was all a promotion of what we were doing. It was the megaphone that we were able to use to announce to the world that child bedlessness, even today, is still a very unknown, uncovered problem in our country.
Hmm.
And two, there is a solution. We have found a way to solve that. We just need more people to be on board and to help out.
Yeah.
And those are the megaphones that has got us to where we're at right now. And still, the sad truth, Reese,
Hmm.
as you and I sit here and have this chat, and as everybody out there is listening, there are 155 to 160,000 kids that are just on our waiting list,
My
waiting to get
goodness.
beds. And the stark, sad reality of that is we still only cover 27% of the United States.
Man.
So there are over 70% that still, and 160,000 is a big number,
Yeah.
still only represents 30%. There's 70% of the United States right now that are in need.
Hmm.
They don't even know this exists, and they don't know that those families that have kids sleeping on the floor, they don't know that this problem has a solution.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't heard of the organization until you reached out, and I was like, man, I'm sure it's going on here where I'm at in North Carolina. I'm sure this is going on
100%.
everywhere. And I don't want to sound vain because I'm not, and I'm very empathetic, but I felt really bad that I never even thought about it. Like, I didn't think, man, there's a kid out here that doesn't have
Mm.
anywhere to sleep right now. That I
Well,
didn't think they're sleeping on a pile of clothes. That is heartbreaking.
I tell a chapter number one, don't feel bad because everybody is that way. We've trained all these chapter presidents, and each chapter president, there's usually 2 of them in a chapter, and then they've got 10 or 20 core team members. So we're talking, tens of thousands of volunteers
Yeah.
that are core team members. and they'll all tell you the same thing. Had no idea.
Yeah.
Had no idea. And when they finally took the time to research, and I encourage all of the listeners today, go to your school counselors, go to your teachers, go to the first responders, go to these agencies like CASA and foster care and CPS. Ask them, is child bedlessness? It's not a real word. That's even the word doesn't even know exists, right?
Yeah.
But go ask these people, hey, is there really kids that don't sleep on the or that don't have a bed? They're going to tell you absolutely, and then say, well, what are they sleeping on? And that's what's going to blow your socks off,
Mm.
right? That's what you're going to realize, that it's not just a problem, but it's a terrible one. And when you think about it, when you really stop, slow down for a minute and think, what does it mean for a child to not have a bed, not have a place like that, like a comfortable place to sleep day in and day out? When you think of, let's just talk about the physical effects, right?
Yes.
These kids, they don't get a good night's sleep. They wake up sore. They're not in a great mood. I mean, how many times when you and I don't have a good night's sleep and we sleep in a freaking bed, right? You know, when you and I don't have a good night's sleep, it's not like we're the most chipper, happy person to be around,
Right.
right? The saying, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, is a real
Oh,
saying.
yeah.
So these kids go to school, they're not ready to learn,
No.
not like the other kids. So their grades get affected. They get a reputation for being bad behaved kids in a bad mood. I mean, and that stems from just the physical impact of not having a bed. Then you talk about emotionally and
Yeah.
psychologically and socially. These kids can't have sleepovers.
Nope.
They're embarrassed by their room. They don't want their friends to come in the room. And then they go to their other friends' houses and they've got throw pillows
Right.
on their bed. These kids don't even have a bed. Some of them don't even have a pillow. They're sleeping on their clothes. So there's a psychological issue there. And then you think about what happens, Reese, when you and I have a bad day at work, or when we're frustrated or depressed, or an argument with our spouse or a friend. What's the first place we long for?
The
Where
bed.
do we
I'm
want to
going
go?
home and I'm going to the bed. I'm going to
I'm
sleep.
going to
I don't
bed.
have time for this today.
When we're sick, we're
Yeah.
crying out loud. Think about a kid that has a cold. He's sleeping on his clothes.
With no cover. Oh, man.
I mean, talk about, these are the things that when you stop and slow down and really think about it, and the situations that life brings on us,
Mm-hmm.
these kids are no different.
Yeah.
And the sad reality is, these kids are in these situations not because of their choices. They're there because of someone else's choices. And sometimes it's not even a choice, it's just a circumstance, a fire, or a mom grabs a grocery bag and stuffs it full of whatever she can because she has minutes to get out of a really bad situation. I mean, that happens all the
Yep.
time. People die and kids have to go into foster care, or they go to the grandparents. They're not ready for these kids, right?
Right.
And beds are expensive nowadays.
Yeah.
And so, food, clothing, shelter, those are the three big ones that people really focus in on when they're struggling. Unfortunately and unrighteously, beds are a luxury, and they shouldn't be that. They don't have to be that way,
Agree.
right? You and I, our communities, it's our responsibility to provide that for these kids,
You're
right?
right.
I knew a long time ago, this problem, Reese, isn't going to be solved by some farm kid from Idaho, right? It's going to be solved by people in local communities, willing, wanting, and having the courage to step up and solve this problem for the kids in their communities. And that's what, people right now listening to this, if I can ask one thing of you, open your mouth, share this pandemic you're learning about, find out how bad it is. And guess what happens? You start talking about it. You start sharing it with people in the grocery store. You just don't know whose ears are hearing this. You don't know that the mom with the three kids holding on to that grocery cart walks by and hears you talk about, hey, there's a charity that provides beds for kids. Those three kids might not have a bed. She now knows because you just opened your mouth. Or you find someone that's wanting and looking for a way to give back. They just don't know how. Well, guess what? You go to shpbeds.org, our website. You're not going to come to some big, huge national webpage.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to come to is exactly what we want people to realize, is this is a local problem. That's just the stark reality that we live in, and this is a community problem. And when you go to our website, shpbeds.org, like I said, you're not going to come to some big national website. You're going to come to the local chapter, the chapter that's closest to you. You're going to see how many kids are in need that have applied for a bed. You're going to see how many beds they've provided within the community. And keep in mind, there's probably a very small percentage of that community that even knows this exists, right? So, you can share it, and you're going to see those numbers and those applications go up because of you. And that's a good thing, because we don't know there's a problem until we expose it. And the only way to expose it is talk about it, is share it, is to find out, is reach out to these agencies. I learned a long time ago that this was a problem, and a major problem, mostly because the agencies like CASA, Child Protective Services, these agencies that work with these families, I became like their best friend. Like they loved me
Hmm.
because I provided beds for kids. And I found out from them that oftentimes providing a bed for a child was the single hardest thing of all the things: food, clothing, shelter, toys, whatever. A bed for a child was the single hardest thing for them to find. How crazy is that? Isn't that
Unheard
nuts?
of. For real.
Yeah,
My
we
mind is blown.
yeah, we partner up with a lot of service organizations like Just Serve. There's one called Care Portal.
Hmm.
Some people are familiar with it. What they do is they provide all sorts of services for anybody that needs whatever: bus ride, whatever. Right? They can enter in, hey, I need this, and local people, like local churches in North Carolina that are Care Portal champions, they get these quote applications, and they can fulfill them. Well, guess what is the number one
A
request?
bed.
And the hardest thing to
A
find
bed.
is a bed. So now, I mean, it's a natural fit for us. They're one of our national partnerships, because they know the need and they don't have the resources. Well, guess what? We know the need and we have the resources. They have the manpower to
Hmm.
deliver them. That's what we always lack, because we can build these beds super
Yeah.
fast. Our record in one build is a bed every 12 seconds. Think
Wow.
about that. But we can't deliver them that fast, right? That takes an army of people, and that's what we need, is an army of people. So people out there, our website, shpbeds.org, go to it, learn about it. If this is something that really strikes a chord to you, volunteer. And you know what? You can donate. We're a nonprofit. That's how we, fund all of this. And if you look at it, and their chapter isn't close by, and this is something you really want to be a part of, you can start a chapter. Anybody can. Listen, if this farm kid from Idaho can do something, you can. I
Yeah.
promise you.
You d they can. They can. Even I'm gonna donate. I'm
Awesome. Yes.
definitely gonna do
What
that.
what part of North Carolina are you from?
Well, I live in Burlington, but I'm from Maryland
Burlington.
originally. So, yeah. Yeah.
We got chapters all
You
over
guys have one
Maryland,
in North
all over North
Carolina?
Carolina. But what's funny about that is my wife and I about 4 years ago moved to Charlotte,
Mhm.
well, to Mooresville, North
Okay.
Carolina, because 75% of our chapters are on the East Coast.
Okay.
Well, when, as an organization, we buy mattresses for our chapters, well, shipping mattresses from Idaho to Charlotte, North Carolina, was not only stupid, it was really expensive. And so we moved to North Carolina. I took my whole family to
Mhm.
North Carolina for the simple purpose of finding a huge warehouse that we can then order and store in inventory mattresses there to supply mattresses for our whole East Coast chapters. And that has saved us, I mean, now it's got to save us $500,000 just in
That's
freight
awesome.
alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have chapters, I mean, 400 plus, and I don't know how many have in North Carolina. You can go to our website and see, but it's probably 12.
I'm gonna go look after this because I really am gonna donate to this. I really
Awesome.
love what you have going on. And for the final question of this segment, before we go into the next one, if you could go back and talk to the Luke who started this, what would you tell him?
Wow. Be ready, get ready, enjoy the ride. And I always tell myself, if there's one thing I don't do very well, is stop and smell the roses. I think a lot of founders are the same way. We're go, 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 go. Entrepreneurs are go, 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 go. And I really try to stop and take some time and reflect and enjoy where we're at right now, and
Yeah.
enjoy the journeys, enjoy the ups and downs. And that's probably the biggest advice I give myself is, enjoy the wins, but also enjoy the losses too. Enjoy the things, the hardships that you have to learn. And they're hard, yeah, but they're also part of life, and they're part of growth. And just like child bedlessness, you can't solve a problem. You can't fix something wrong with you until you are willing to face it, accept that it's happened, accept that it's part of you. You can't work on it until you know it's there. And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful part about being human, and being part of our human race, and as well as building something like a sleep in heavenly peace. And so, yeah,
Okay.
that's
Nice
what I tell
words of
myself.
wisdom. I like that. The next segment is called uncomfortable questions. And basically, I'll ask you either or questions, but you have to choose one and explain why. And you don't get to opt out.
Ooh, gotcha.
Are
All
you
right.
ready?
Nice. Are you
I'm
ready?
ready.
Let's do it.
Cots or hammocks?
Caught. Let me tell you why. Because a hammock, they're too unstable for me. I feel like I'm going to flip out of them all the time. I don't know. I'll put it this way: I like a cot to sleep in. I like a hammock just to hang out in. Is that
That
fair?
is fair. That's very fair.
Okay.
I grew up
Okay.
with hammocks, like, because I'm from the country, as you know, and my uncle and his wife, they lived outside of Williamsburg, Virginia. I think the area is called Tuano, but I could be wrong. Anyway, they lived in a very rural area. So my uncle has all this land, and they used to have a hammock, and I used to hang out in it. But I felt like I would fall out if I go to sleep in it too. So
Yep.
I
Yep.
understand.
Sure.
Beach
Good.
or mountains?
It used to be mountains, but it's kind of an unfair question because I live in Idaho, so a beach by far.
While you were in Charlotte, did you ever go to any of the beaches in North Carolina?
We went to Myrtle.
Okay. Okay.
Myrtle. We went to what's the one above that?
Yeah,
Wilmington
yeah.
or
So they
yeah,
got Riceville Beach in Wilmington, Fort Fisher, which is that's like a whole it's basically a base on a beach.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Carolina Beach.
Yeah, it was okay. But I will say this: I'm from Idaho, right? We don't have fireflies. So me and my wife, we went to Asheville, which is a
Oh
beautiful,
yeah.
by the way, everybody. Over 4th of July, we got this little bed and breakfast rental Airbnb, right?
Hmm.
That was up in the mountains. They had this little trail that you could walk up, and they had a bench up there in the mountains, so you could look over the valley and watch the fireworks, right? Well, we didn't give two craps about the fireworks because we saw the thousands of
Fireflies.
fireflies.
Aw.
It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever
Yeah.
seen. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So I'll pick the mountains for that one.
I used to catch fireflies all the time when I was a kid.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
one, maybe I'll stump you on this one. Exercising or eating healthy for the rest of your life. You can only do one.
I would rather exercise 100%.
Okay. Why?
Yeah, I don't eat super great anyways. Well, that's not true. I try, but I actually do a lot of exercise. I have a routine every morning.
Mhm.
I try to stay in pretty good shape, but more exercise
Yeah.
mentally for me is why I like exercise so much. It just helps me start the day, helps me feel productive. Again, the entrepreneurship, go go go. If I'm not working on something, if I'm not building something, I'm uneasy, right? I'm
Yeah.
at unease. And so when I feel like I'm building and building muscle and working out, I'm more comfortable than if I'm not.
Okay. College or entrepreneurship?
Entrepreneurship, 100%. I
Why?
don't want to say waste your time in college because it's not a waste of time. You're talking to a guy, a farm kid from Idaho. I believe the trade skills, it's a forgotten skill. College is good for whatever, particular field you want to go into. For me, I'm a builder.
All right, now. And last one, credit or cash?
I'm not a credit guy. I'm a cash guy. So all you kids out there, listen, become a cash guy because you don't want to be buried in debt with credit.
That's a great reason as to why.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. This final segment is called Rants with Sharice. And during this segment, you get to rant about whatever it is you want. It'll be about not using signal lights, people choosing not to use deodorant, whatever. But after you share your rant, you have to give us a solution on fixing whatever it is that you're complaining about. The floor is
Whoa.
yours. Yeah, and if you want to know, this stemmed from back when I was in the Marine Corps. I complained a lot, and then once I got a little bit of leadership under my belt and promoted, my Marines complained too. And so, if you're going to complain, then also try to come up with a solution to fix the complaint. So that's where this segment came from. So the floor is yours, and
This is catching me off guard, man. What do I rant about? I'm sure my wife can tell you what I rant about. I think I probably the biggest. I'll tell you one thing that just chaps my hide, if you will. We're from Twin Falls, Idaho,
mhm,
right? It's kind of a I don't want to say a retirement community, but there is a lot of older folks here, and I know this is very cliche-ish of me to say, but my gosh, can we learn how to drive? Can we? My one of my biggest complaints is, and I'm a little bit of a faster driver, maybe a little aggressive, but there is something when you come to an intersection, everybody. When you come to an intersection and you have oncoming traffic and you're turning left, it's okay to get out in the middle of the intersection and then go when people pass. It just drives me crazy that people sit at, they don't pull out when they're turning left. You know what I'm saying? Am I
Yes,
saying that
you
right?
are saying
Oh,
it right.
it's so aggravating to me. So the solution is either don't drive or learn how to drive. I don't know what to tell you.
When I go to visit my older brother in Maryland, he lives near DC. There's a lot of roads like that, and that's the most annoying thing driving out there and dealing with that. There are roads like that here in North Carolina, but overall, it's more like that up in Maryland. I hate it.
I seriously, and it's even young kids.
Yeah,
My kids do it sometimes, not anymore because I've
got on him about.
pardon the pardon the pun, but I bitched at them about it. But I mean, I'm like, I literally asked them, do they teach you not to do this? Because they taught us to do
Yeah,
that. Dad, that's too aggressive driving. I'm like, oh my gosh, come on, guys.
that is too funny.
Uh,
Before you go, can you please share your social media, share your website one more time with our listeners so we can go out there and support what you got going on?
Yes, thank you. Everybody, you can find more about SHP at shpbeds.org. You can find out what's going on in your local area. You can learn how to, in fact, go to shpbeds.org/media, right? You're going to see pictures and videos of deliveries and builds and testimonials of people. I mean, if you want to see what child bedlessness really looks like, you can go to our website and find that out. Or I would love to have you like me on Facebook. I'm an old guy, so that's probably the biggest platform I use, Facebook and Instagram. And it's SHB Luke or Luke Mickelson. You'll find me. I'm out there easy. I share content every single day of what's going on with Sleep Family Peace, podcasts that I'm on, pictures and stories of chapter presidents, volunteers, families that are getting beds for their kids. My life goal is to share that child bedlessness is a real problem. And I feel an obligation, I feel a need to share it with everybody. And I won't stop until I'm dead because I think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And it's that important to these kids that we can be there for them and quite frankly be there for yourself. If you want true joy, stop looking at yourself. Just see how you can help other
Mm.
people. Your problems don't go away, I promise you, but they will feel way less heavy, and the outlook you have on life just changes. So thanks, Reese, for
Of
having me on. I'm
course.
super grateful. And you listeners out there, I hope you take the time and take my challenge up to reach out to those that might know about child bedlessness, find out for yourself, and then share that knowledge. It does no good trapped inside your head. Share that with people. Share this podcast. Find our website. Share it with someone. You can be the actual solution. You can be the good in that child's life that can help them for a decade sleeping well.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words that you just said. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on here. I can't wait to have you back so we can talk about, that podcast that you're going to launch soon.
Amen. Do it.
I'm excited well, I can't be on because I don't have a nonprofit, but I can't wait to talk to you more about.
We'll have you on.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
You bet. Thanks, Reese.
You're welcome. And thank you for listening to Connect Like Minds.